Well, after almost all day messing around, there's the finished product. I had to cut the bracket shorter about 4.5 inches because I didn't want it banging around so much. Still, there's plenty of room. I could have cut them shorter. But another issue, I'm worried that's pretty tight, but worried that thing's going to fall off and get lost. Anyways, that's that. Hello and welcome to Exploring the Holos. Today we're going to be talking about consciousness, what it is and where it comes from. This may end up being more than a one video series, but I'm not positive on that yet. So make sure you like and subscribe and share all this information to anybody you think needs it. Let's get into it. About 2 years ago I did a video on this subject, but I think it's time for a refresh. The only thing in my opinion that separates us from the rest of the animals is consciousness and our degree of consciousness, other than our physical appearance. One of science's greatest mysteries is the hard problem of consciousness. And the reason why the academic community in science has such a hard problem with consciousness is because they don't know actually what they're looking for. They refuse to acknowledge the mental aspect of reality, so they will never find out what consciousness is or where it comes from. The great philosopher Leibniz had the philosophy or he said one time, that if you're able to expand the brain and look inside, you would not find consciousness. This is known as Leibniz's mill, where he's looking at the brain as if it were a type of mill. If you could go inside and look at all the gears and the pulleys, you wouldn't see consciousness being made anywhere. You wouldn't be able to find it. Likewise, you couldn't crack open somebody's skull and see all their thoughts or their dreams. So what is consciousness? First of all, we need to describe sentience. And this is very often confused, and I heard it from very smart people trying to say that animals don't have sentience, and that's wrong. And even from people that are animal advocates and heavily into the animal rescue, I've heard this from, and it's kind of frustrating that people don't think or don't understand that animals have feelings, thoughts, and that's basically what sentience is. Sentience is just the ability to have a subjective experience. And at its basic level, if a being is sentient, they can feel, think, and experience, but they don't have the ability to plan. They don't have the ability to see themselves as an I or a self. And that's the only difference. And humans have the ability to plan and have the ability for self-awareness. And that is called self-awareness or self-consciousness, or the broader term consciousness. And this is very often confused. I think a big reason why people get confused is because mainstream science is confused about the difference between sentience and consciousness. They will use the two terms interchangeably, and that is very confusing to everybody else who subscribes to regular science. The main problem with science is the belief that matter is foundational, which means that they believe mind and consciousness originate from matter, which has never been shown to be the case. They've never presented a plausible theory on how this works. Reality is far more simple than that. Because materialism can't define the problem of consciousness without a true understanding of mind, materialists can't solve the problem. It's illogical to assert that objects can produce subjectivity, but that's the direction science wants to take us. We hear all the time about the fears of AI becoming conscious when it's just not realistic. AI can become destructive, but it's never going to truly be conscious. Not to make this a rant against materialist science, but they're also the ones making absurd claims that order can spring from chaos and matter can rise from nothingness, as in the Big Bang. I'm more frustrated by those who think that I'm crazy for questioning the scientific and religious establishment. The hard problem of consciousness is when you try to explain it without mind or subjectivity because you deny their existence. So how does human consciousness evolve beyond sentience? Julian Jaynes believed that consciousness evolved culturally through language. And you can see he's got this book right here you might want to check out. Most animals other than humans are preoccupied with detecting external sensory data to survive in the moment. They live their lives in the present, unable to reflect on the past and future. As humans, we outgrew living to survive in the moment. The human neocortex began to generate internal content. This was the beginning of visual and auditory hallucinations. Jaynes believed that these auditory hallucinations became what we know today as our internal monologue or our inner voice. Although not everyone has an internal dialogue, if you just suddenly started hearing a voice in your head, you'd probably go to the doctor. Schizophrenics are no different than anyone else. They just have an uncontrollable internal monologue. As these hallucinations organized and narrated one's life, it's at that point it's considered consciousness. Written and spoken language was developed to share our conscious thoughts with others to better work together and survive. This is known as a human society. The development of consciousness isn't random, it's teleological. We must first become self-aware if we're to reach perfection and hyper-awareness. The unconscious controls all the syntactic bodily functions like heartbeat, lungs, walking, even driving to work. You've heard of people sleepwalking and doing things unconsciously. I'm sure you've driven somewhere and not realized you were thinking about something else while you're driving and you don't remember even driving there. That's because it's all unconscious at that point. Consciousness is the semantic adding meaning to experience. These are functions you are really present for and think about, like conversations and planning. All right, so where is consciousness? Well, of course, it's behind the eyeballs. No, your senses make it seem that way. It's dimensionless, existing purely in the mental domain. It does, however, allow us to keep track of time and order of events in our lives. Basically, consciousness is like the narrator of your life, which requires knowledge of a language. This is why it's not common for animals other than humans to be conscious. An individual's consciousness is the analog I. The collective consciousness is the analog all. But where did God come from? Well, according to Julian Jaynes, this is a quote now, the preposterous hypothesis we have come to is that one time human nature was split in two, an executive part called a God and a follower part called a man. Neither part was conscious. This is almost incomprehensible to us. So what he's saying is that prior to consciousness that we have today, humans simply obeyed the unconscious. They were hearing archetypal auditory hallucinations, and this is what they thought was God's voice. These voices could have been mistaken for a God. This is known as bicameralism. Although ultimately you have one mind, it's as if it was divided into two parts. The conscious mind receives all of its data from the unconscious mind, whether from external world or internal world. Unconscious produces the data for the conscious to organize and then act upon. You can dream without a conscious mind, but it's chaotic and usually makes no sense. When you're dreaming with your conscious mind, That is known as lucid dreaming, and that's very rare. And I've certainly never done it. I think it's important to understand that your unconscious does all the thinking. That is known as the production mind. And your conscious mind takes that data and decides what to do with it. Your conscious is known as the consumption mind. So in reality, your unconscious is the real you. That is the part that's eternal. Your conscious mind is created every lifetime as you learn a new language. You don't produce thoughts consciously, you only direct them. The thoughts are always produced unconsciously, and the conscious mind determines how to interpret them. And that is why animals are sentient. They are not conscious because they don't have a language. Now, in my opinion, I feel like animals who have lived with humans their entire life and have a vague understanding of human words, I feel like they may have developed a self-awareness in some cases that I've seen. But I could be wrong. That's just my take on things. And I think I'm going to do more videos on this subject because I find it very intriguing. And there's a lot to go on here. But thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in next time. Make sure you like and subscribe. Be safe. Ad Astra, my friends.